Have you ever felt a power inside you that you couldn't explain? A divine stirring that moves you beyond human understanding? Today I want to tell you something that will shake you and awaken your spirit. Because if you recognize the signs I'm about to reveal, you are not just blessed, you are dangerously anointed by God. And this is not just a blessing, it is a calling that carries both responsibility and unstoppable spiritual authority. If you miss this message, you might not realize the power within you until it passes you by. Brothers and sisters, God is raising a generation of believers who are not content with mediocrity, who are not satisfied with small victories, but who are called to move mountains, to perform miracles, and to change destinies. Today I am going to show you the unmistakable signs that reveal God has placed a dangerous anointing on your life. These are not ordinary blessings, they are supernatural marks of destiny. And here is why you must stay with me until the end. Many people carry potential and never realize it because they fail to recognize the signs. But when you understand these signs, your faith will explode, your purpose will be clarified, and your life will never be the same again. God is about to speak directly to your heart through this message. When God's dangerous anointing rests upon a person, something miraculous begins to happen in their life, something that cannot be explained by logic or by human reasoning. Doors that were once closed, doors that seemed permanently shut by circumstances, opposition, or human limitation begin to open. These are not ordinary opportunities that anyone could walk through. These are divine openings, orchestrated by the hand of God Himself. You see, the world often tries to define what is possible based on what it sees, but God's favor does not operate according to human standards. It operates according to heaven's decree. When a person carries this anointing, they find themselves in situations where timing is perfect, connections are divinely aligned, and provision appears when there seems to be no way. I want you to imagine a life where every step you take is accompanied by God's favor. This is not a fantasy. This is the reality for those who are dangerously anointed. The favor of God is like a supernatural wind that blows behind you, lifting you above obstacles, propelling you past resistance, and causing even your enemies to bow in astonishment. There are times in life when you will be surrounded by closed doors, when every human solution fails, when the natural world seems determined to resist you, and yet, just when it seems impossible, the right door swings open. You may not even recognize who or what caused it, but there it is, favor from God, opening what the world tried to keep shut. This supernatural favor does not always come as a grand, obvious miracle. Sometimes it comes quietly, through subtle alignments. Perhaps it is a meeting with the right person at the right moment. Perhaps it is a financial provision that comes precisely when needed, even when you have exhausted all natural means. Perhaps it is an insight, a strategy, or an idea that seems to come from nowhere, yet it solves a problem that has seemed insurmountable. This is the hand of God moving in the life of someone who is dangerously anointed. The anointing attracts favor as naturally as iron attracts a magnet, and it aligns your steps with heaven's plan in ways that are unmistakable. But there is a key principle you must understand. This favor is never passive. It requires action, faith, and courage. Doors do not just open and wait for you to decide. They open and invite you to step boldly through them. There is always a test of faith involved. Sometimes the door that God opens may seem risky or uncomfortable. Perhaps it is a career opportunity that requires leaving the familiar, a calling that requires stepping out in faith, or a relationship that requires courage to embrace. The dangerous anointing will push you beyond what is comfortable, beyond what is safe, and even beyond what you thought you were capable of. But when you obey, when you step through that door in faith, you will find that God's favor was already there to meet you, supporting you every step of the way. I have seen lives transformed by this kind of supernatural favor. There are testimonies of people who faced financial ruin, health crises, or impossible odds, only to see a sudden turnaround that could not be explained by human reasoning. A man or woman who was overlooked, ignored, or rejected suddenly finds themselves in a position of influence and blessing. A project that seemed doomed to fail is miraculously completed and exceeds every expectation. A relationship that seemed impossible is restored, reconciled, and strengthened. These are not coincidences. These are manifestations of God's favor resting upon a dangerously anointed life. Favor works in mysterious ways. It often positions you to receive blessings you did not even know you needed. Sometimes God will orchestrate circumstances so that a simple step in obedience leads to exponential results. It could be a word of encouragement spoken at the right time, a connection with a person who becomes a lifelong partner in your calling, or even an event that seems minor but carries eternal significance. When a person is dangerously anointed, they will recognize these moments as divine appointments. They will understand that nothing is random, that every alignment, every opportunity, and every favor is part of God's plan to advance their destiny. The favor of God also protects. It is not only about opportunity, it is about divine alignment in the midst of opposition. There will always be forces that try to resist your breakthrough. There will always be obstacles, enemies, and challenges designed to stop you from walking in your calling. Yet the favor of God will ensure that these obstacles cannot prevail. Even when circumstances appear threatening, the anointed person finds themselves surrounded by unseen protection. The favor of God causes doors to open in one area even when another closes. It positions allies to appear at the right moment. It provides insight and wisdom that cannot be gained through human experience. This is why the dangerously anointed never remain stuck. No matter the opposition, favor ensures that their path continues forward. It is also important to understand that divine favor is contagious. When God opens a door for one person, it often affects many others. The favor that rests on you will not only advance your life, but will also create opportunities for those around you. When you walk through the doors that God opens, you become a channel of blessing for others. People may not understand why things are working out for you, but they will see the results. They may even call it luck, but you will know that it is the supernatural favor of God at work. This favor does not just benefit the individual. It impacts families, communities, and nations. Many people live their entire lives without experiencing this kind of favor simply because they do not recognize it when it comes. They wait for the world to give them approval, for circumstances to align perfectly, for the timing to seem convenient. But divine favor waits for no one. It requires faith, readiness, and willingness to step into the unknown. When you are dangerously anointed, God is constantly opening doors, providing opportunities, and aligning situations for your breakthrough, but you must walk in obedience and trust. This is the secret of those who see their destinies fulfilled. They recognize God's favor when it appears, they act boldly, and they step confidently into what heaven has prepared. Favor is not limited to material or visible blessings. Sometimes it manifests in spiritual opportunities, moments of clarity, and times when God speaks directly to your heart. You may be given insight into a problem that no one else can solve. You may be positioned to speak a word that brings healing, restoration, or revelation. You may encounter moments where your presence itself becomes a catalyst for change. These are divine opportunities that appear because of the anointing, because God's hand is upon you, and because favor moves in your life with precision and purpose. In conclusion, the favor that comes with being dangerously anointed is supernatural, unstoppable, and life-transforming. It opens doors that cannot be opened by human hands, aligns circumstances beyond natural understanding, and provides divine opportunities that can change the trajectory of your life forever. Those who recognize and embrace this favor walk in authority, confidence, and victory, knowing that every step is guided by the hand of God. When God's dangerous anointing rests upon a person, the supernatural begins to move in ways that defy human understanding. Doors that have been closed for years suddenly swing open. Opportunities that seemed impossible appear in the most unexpected ways. You may have faced rejection, disappointment, or delay, yet when the hand of God moves, nothing can stand in the way of the destiny He has prepared for you. This is not luck, and it is not coincidence. This is the favor of God working in a life that is marked by His anointing. When you are dangerously anointed, people will often notice the unusual alignment of circumstances in your favor, but they will never truly understand the source of it because it comes from heaven. Favor often works subtly at first. It is not always a loud miracle. Sometimes it is quiet, almost imperceptible. Perhaps it is a meeting with the right person who changes the course of your life, or an unexpected word of encouragement at exactly the right moment. Perhaps it is an insight or strategy that seems to come out of nowhere, solving problems that no human solution could touch. When someone carries a dangerous anointing, the favor of God positions them in ways that are beyond natural reasoning. It is like the wind blowing behind a sailboat, invisible but powerful, propelling you forward when you can barely move on your own. This favor will often bring opportunities that seem too good to be true. Doors will open in places where no doors existed. You may find yourself in situations where the timing is perfect, where people come into your life who provide the guidance, resources, or connections you need. You may even experience provision that appears out of nowhere when every human source has been exhausted. The favor of God is precise, and it does not fail. It positions you exactly where you need to be, even when the world says it is impossible. The favor of the dangerously anointed is like a divine magnet, drawing blessings, opportunities, and alignment toward them. However, divine favor always requires action. It is not passive. God will open doors, but He expects us to walk through them. There will be moments when the opportunity that appears is risky, uncomfortable, or unexpected. The favor of God will push you to act, to step out in faith, and to trust that He has already gone before you. Perhaps it is a career opportunity that requires leaving stability for uncertainty. Perhaps it is a calling that demands stepping into leadership or service that challenges you in ways you never imagined. Perhaps it is a financial or relational risk that requires courage and faith. The dangerously anointed understand that favor is never separate from obedience. When they step through the doors God opens, they find that His favor has already prepared everything for their success, protection, and advancement. I have seen lives transformed by this favor. I have seen people who were overlooked, rejected, or forgotten suddenly placed in positions of influence and blessing. I have seen financial impossibilities become abundant provision. I have seen relationships restored when all seemed lost. I have seen projects that were destined to fail succeed beyond imagination. These are not coincidences. These are the workings of God's favor on a life that is dangerously anointed. When you carry this anointing, you will notice that even in opposition, God's favor remains with you. You will experience a supernatural alignment that ensures the right people, the right circumstances, and the right resources appear at exactly the right time. Favor also protects. It is not only about opportunities. It is about divine alignment in the midst of challenges. You may encounter resistance, attacks, and obstacles, but God's favor ensures that these do not stop the plan of your life. Even when circumstances seem impossible, even when enemies appear to have the advantage, the favor of God positions you to prevail. It diverts problems, opens alternative paths, and raises up allies who come to your aid at the perfect time. The hand of God in favor is like a shield and a compass. It guides you, protects you, and propels you forward. Divine favor also manifests in ways that extend beyond the individual. When God opens doors for you, the opportunities you receive often benefit others as well. Families are blessed, communities are uplifted, and those around you may experience breakthroughs because of the favor resting upon your life. Favor is contagious. It is catalytic. Those who walk in it become vessels of blessing for many. This is why it is important to recognize, embrace, and steward the favor of God. It is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to advance the kingdom, to bring life, and to shift destinies. Many people fail to recognize this favor because they are waiting for perfect circumstances, for everything to align naturally, for approval from the world. But divine favor does not wait for perfection. It operates outside human logic and timing. It requires discernment to see the doors God has opened, courage to step through, and faith to trust that He is already working behind the scenes. The dangerously anointed are sensitive to these openings. They move quickly, decisively, and faithfully, knowing that hesitation can allow opportunities to slip away. They understand that when God's favor appears, it is time to act without delay. Favor is not limited to material or visible blessings. Often it manifests in spiritual alignment, in clarity and insight, and in moments of divine revelation. You may be positioned to speak a word that heals, restores, or inspires. You may be given guidance that changes the course of your decisions. You may find yourself in the right place to encourage someone else at exactly the right moment. This is part of the supernatural favor that accompanies the dangerously anointed. It positions them to influence circumstances in ways that leave others in awe, yet they understand that it is God's hand at work, not their own strength. The favor of God works through timing that is often invisible to the human eye. It is not always immediate or dramatic, but it is always effective. Doors may appear slowly, but when they do, they open with perfect alignment, revealing opportunities that are life-changing and destiny-shaping. Those who recognize this favor learn to trust God's timing, to remain patient in the wait, and to step boldly when the moment comes. They do not panic, they do not force outcomes, and they do not rely on human understanding. They walk with confidence, knowing that God's favor never fails. Favor transforms ordinary circumstances into extraordinary results. It takes situations that seem hopeless and creates pathways that no human could engineer. It draws resources, people, and wisdom together in ways that appear miraculous. It positions the dangerously anointed to experience a life that is not bound by limitations. Every step becomes purposeful, every encounter significant, and every moment filled with the potential to impact eternity. Favor is a living, dynamic force that moves in conjunction with the anointing, aligning heaven and earth to advance the purposes of God through a chosen life. One of the most undeniable signs that a person is dangerously anointed by God is a heart that cannot ignore his calling. This is not a casual interest or a passing curiosity. It is a persistent, relentless stirring in the spirit that drives a person to seek God's purpose above all else. Those who are dangerously anointed are never satisfied with mediocrity. They are never content to simply live an ordinary life while the extraordinary plan of God waits to be fulfilled in them. There is a restlessness, a spiritual urgency that pushes them forward even when the path is unclear, even when obstacles appear insurmountable, and even when the world tries to convince them to settle for less than what God has ordained. This is a calling that cannot be silenced, a divine pull that cannot be ignored, and a fire that burns continually in the heart of the anointed. When a person carries this anointing, they feel a deep discomfort when they are not fulfilling their purpose. Ordinary routines, repetitive tasks, and trivial concerns no longer satisfy them. The voice of God becomes louder than the noise of the world, and it calls them to rise above their circumstances, to step into a life of influence, impact, and destiny. This restlessness is not anxiety or dissatisfaction. It is the Spirit of God reminding them of the greatness that awaits, the assignment that cannot be postponed, and the eternal significance of the life they have been given. Those who are dangerously anointed are acutely aware of wasted time and lost opportunities. Every moment that passes without stepping into God's plan feels like a moment of lost destiny, and they are unwilling to allow it. The heart that cannot ignore God's calling also carries an unshakable vision for the future. The dangerously anointed person begins to see beyond the limitations of the natural world. They perceive the invisible realm, the spiritual battles, and the eternal impact of their decisions. They see lives that can be touched, communities that can be transformed, and nations that can be influenced. This vision is not born out of ambition or pride. It is birthed by the Spirit of God, placed deep within the soul to guide, direct, and propel them forward. When this vision burns within, ordinary distractions fade away, and the calling of God becomes the primary pursuit of their existence. A dangerously anointed heart is also marked by sensitivity to God's voice. While others may ignore spiritual promptings or dismiss divine nudges as coincidence, those with this anointing respond quickly. They recognize that every word, every impression, every stirring in their spirit is potentially a divine instruction. They do not wait for perfect circumstances, nor do they seek the approval of the world. Instead, they act in faith, trusting that obedience to God's voice, even when unclear or uncomfortable, will lead them to the fulfillment of their destiny. This responsiveness distinguishes them from ordinary believers. It is a signature of those chosen for extraordinary purpose. This calling often brings a sense of urgency that drives extraordinary discipline. The dangerously anointed are willing to sacrifice comfort, personal ambition, and temporary pleasures to pursue the eternal plan of God. They understand that God's timing is perfect and that delay can compromise destiny. While others procrastinate, hesitate, or wait for ideal conditions, they move decisively, propelled by the inner conviction that their life has been set apart for a higher purpose. This discipline is not burdensome. It is inspired, sustained, and empowered by the anointing itself. The Spirit of God not only calls them, but also equips them with the endurance, wisdom, and courage necessary to fulfill that calling. Another unmistakable aspect of a heart that cannot ignore God's calling is its resilience in the face of opposition. The dangerously anointed are often confronted by challenges, criticisms, and even spiritual attacks designed to discourage them from pursuing their purpose. Yet these obstacles do not deter them. Instead, they strengthen their resolve. They recognize that every trial, every setback, and every resistance is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to demonstrate faith. Their hearts are anchored in the assurance that God's calling is unshakable and that no force on earth can prevent the fulfillment of His plan. This resilience is a mark of true anointing, for it demonstrates a confidence that rests not on human ability, but on divine empowerment. The dangerously anointed also display an extraordinary sense of responsibility. They understand that being called by God is not a privilege to be taken lightly. It is a stewardship of life, gifts, and influence. Every decision, every action, and every word is weighed against the purpose that has been placed upon their life. This sense of responsibility produces integrity, humility, and accountability. They do not seek glory for themselves, but they seek to honor God through their obedience and service. Their hearts are tuned to the eternal significance of their calling, and they measure success not by temporary accolades, but by the advancement of God's kingdom. This anointing also produces an unusual courage to confront fear, uncertainty, and rejection. When God places a calling on someone's life, the path is rarely easy or predictable. It often requires stepping into the unknown, challenging the status quo, and risking criticism or misunderstanding. The dangerously anointed person does not shrink back. Their heart has been fortified with faith, their mind has been aligned with God's promises, and their spirit has been empowered to act with boldness. Fear may still whisper, doubt may still rise, but the inner conviction of their calling carries them forward, and they press on with unwavering determination. A heart that cannot ignore God's calling also manifests in persistent prayer, worship, and communion with God. The dangerously anointed do not rely solely on natural talent, intelligence, or personal ambition. They understand that their calling requires constant connection with God, that their spiritual vitality must be nurtured, and that the anointing flows most powerfully when their hearts are aligned with His presence. Their lives are marked by consistent devotion, intimate fellowship, and a hunger for divine guidance. This connection keeps them sensitive to God's direction, attuned to opportunities, and equipped to respond to the moments of destiny that arise daily. Furthermore, the dangerously anointed carry an unstoppable influence over others. Their hearts aligned with God's calling naturally draw people into destiny. Others are inspired, encouraged, and awakened by their presence. They become catalysts for change in homes, workplaces, communities, and nations. This influence is not forced or self-serving. It is a natural byproduct of a life surrendered to God and positioned by His calling. People sense the weight of God upon them and are drawn to the light of their purpose. They cannot help but affect the world around them because their calling is visible, tangible, and powerful. Even when the path is lonely, the heart that cannot ignore God's calling presses forward. The dangerously anointed often walk in seasons of solitude, waiting, or preparation. They may feel misunderstood, isolated, or underappreciated, yet the call of God within them refuses to be silenced. They embrace patience without compromise, persistence without surrender, and faith without doubt. The Spirit of God constantly reminds them of the importance of every step, every sacrifice, and every moment of obedience, ensuring that they remain steadfast and undeterred. The dangerously anointed also exhibit an insatiable hunger for spiritual growth. They are not content with simply knowing about God or performing religious duties. They crave a deeper understanding of His Word, a closer intimacy with His Spirit, and a greater revelation of His purposes. This hunger propels them into study, prayer, fasting, and worship. It shapes their character, refines their heart, and strengthens their resolve. It ensures that the calling upon their life is matched by maturity, wisdom, and spiritual authority. Finally, the heart that cannot ignore God's calling compels the person to step out in boldness. It moves them to speak when silence is easy, to act when hesitation is safe, and to trust when fear tempts them to retreat. They carry a divine urgency that the world cannot comprehend, a pressure from within that propels them to fulfill what has been placed in their hands. Every day becomes an opportunity to advance God's purpose, to touch lives, and to leave a lasting impact on the world.